Good morning, class. Today we start with Sources of Capital, Chapter 11. After this chapter, you should be able to identify the types of financing available to a venture. Number 2, you should understand the role of commercial banks in financing new ventures. Number 3, we will be discussing small business administration loans and also government grants. And number 4, to understand aspects of research and development limited partnerships. Let's get started. One of the most difficult problems in creating a new venture or growing a venture is obtaining financing. First, we need to evaluate financing from the perspective of debt versus equity. Is it worth taking debt? And then we need to decide whether to use internal or external funds. Debt financing involves an interest-bearing instrument, which is usually a loan. The payment is only indirectly related to sales and profits. Debt financing is also called asset-based financing, and as the name implies, it requires an asset for collateral. The entrepreneur has to pay back the amount of funds borrowed plus a fee. And the fee is expressed in terms of the interest rate. Short-term financing is used to provide working capital. Funds are usually repaid from resulting sales and profits. Now, long-term debt lasting more than a year may be used to purchase some asset, including part of the asset value as collateral. When interest rates are low, debt financing lets the entrepreneur retain ownership and retain more of the profits. However, we have to act with caution because if the debt is too great, payments become difficult to make. Then growth is inhibited. And think about it, if growth is inhibited and we can't pay our debts, what happens? Bankruptcy becomes a very real possibility. Using debt as financing is called leveraging the firm. The higher the leverage, the greater the risk. Let's go to another way of financing, which is equity financing. Equity financing does not require collateral and offers the investor some form of ownership position in the venture. The investor shares in the profits of the venture. Some key factors in choosing debt or equity financing would be availability of funds, assets of the venture, and, of course, interest rates. Usually, a combination of debt and equity financing is used. Each venture has equity totaling 100%. There may be one owner or multiple owners for larger ventures. This equity funding provides the basis for debt financing, which makes up the capital structure of the venture. The entrepreneur needs to decide whether to use internal or external funds. The most frequently used type of funds are internally generated. The funds come from sources within the company, such as profits, sale of assets, reduction in working capital, extended payment terms, and accounts receivable. In the startup years, most of the profits are usually put back into the venture. Our book states that assets, whenever possible, should be rented and not owned. However, I am always wary of blanket statements like this. In my opinion, the best approach would lie in balancing the two possibilities, owning versus leasing, and then evaluating them in light of the company's situation, financial health, future growth projections, and core competencies. One short-term internal source of funds is through extended payments from suppliers, and another method is by collecting accounts receivable more quickly. There are other general sources which are external to the venture. These alternative sources should be evaluated by the length of time the funds are available, the costs involved, and the terms of the contract. Very few ventures start without the personal funds of the entrepreneur. Personal funds are the least expensive in terms of cost and control. They're also essential in attracting outside funding, often referred to as blood equity. Typical sources of personal funds include savings, life insurance, or mortgage on a house or a car. Outside investors want the entrepreneur to demonstrate financial commitment. The percentage of the entrepreneur's available total assets which are committed to the venture demonstrates the commitment level. An outside investor wants an entrepreneur to have committed all available assets. And it's really not the amount, but the fact that all monies available are committed that makes outside investors feel comfortable. After the entrepreneur, family and friends are a common source of capital. Family and friends provide a small amount of equity funding for new ventures. It's relatively easy to obtain money from family and friends, but the amount of money provided may be small. If it's in the form of equity funding, the family member or friend has an ownership position in the venture. If they have direct input into operations of the venture, it may have a negative effect on employees, facilities, or sales and profit. They are not problem investors and are more patient than other investors in desiring a return on their investment. There are some things that you can do to avoid problems. For example, you must present the positive and negative aspects and the nature of the risks of the investment. To minimize difficulties, keep the business arrangements strictly business. Any loan should specify interest rate and repayment schedule of interest and principal in writing and upfront. A formal agreement specifying details of the funding will definitely help you avoid future disputes. The entrepreneur should carefully consider the impact of the investment on your family member or friend before it's accepted. Each family member or friend should regularly receive income statements showing results every quarter or at least every 6 months. Commercial banks are the source of short-term funds when collateral is available. This is debt financing and requires some tangible guarantee or collateral, some asset with value greater than the loan amount. This collateral can be business assets, personal assets, or the assets of the cosigner of the loan. The asset base for loans is usually accounts receivable, inventory, equipment, or real estate. Sometimes, assets of the entrepreneur or an investor are used when the venture doesn't have enough asset value to qualify for a loan. There are also accounts receivable loans. Accounts receivable provide a good basis for a loan, especially if the customer base is creditworthy. A bank may finance up to 80% of the value of the accounts receivable for creditworthy customers. A factoring arrangement works when the factor, that's the bank, actually buys the accounts receivable at a value below the face value of the sale and collects the money directly from the account. If any of the receivables are not collectible, the factor sustains the loss, not the business. The cost of factoring is higher than the cost of securing a loan against the accounts receivable and include the interest charged on the amount of money advanced until the time the accounts receivable are collected, the commission covering the actual collection, and protection against possible uncollectible accounts. Inventory loans. Inventory is often a basis for a loan, particularly when liquid and easily sold. Finished goods inventory can be financed up to 50% of its value. Trust receipts are a type of inventory loan used to finance floor plans of retailers such as auto dealers. In trust receipts, the bank advances a large percentage of the invoiced goods price and is paid as the inventory sells. There are also equipment loans. Equipment can secure longer-term financing on a 3 to 5 year basis. Equipment financing can fall into any of several categories: financing the purchase of new equipment, financing used equipment already owned by the company, sale-leaseback leaseback financing, or lease financing. Whenever new equipment purchases or presently owned equipment act as collateral, usually 50 to 80% of the value can be financed depending on sellability. In sale-leaseback financing, the entrepreneur sells the equipment to a lender and then leases it back for the life of the equipment. In lease financing, a small down payment allows the company use of the equipment and a guarantee to make a certain number of payments over a period of time. Lastly, real estate loans. These are easily obtained to finance land, plant, or building, often up to 75% of its value. Cash flow financing or conventional bank loans include lines of credit, installment loans, straight commercial loans, long-term loans, and character loans. Line of credit financing is most frequently used by entrepreneurs. The company pays a commitment fee to ensure the bank will make the loan when requested and pays interest on any borrowed funds. There are also installment loans. A venture can get an installment loan if they have a previous sales and profits. These are 30 to 40-day short-term funds, and they're usually used to cover working capital needs, such as seasonal financing. Now, straight commercial loans are a hybrid of the installment loan. Funds are advanced for 30 to 90 days. These self-liquidating loans are for seasonal financing and for building up inventories. There are long-term loans. These are usually available only to strong, mature companies. Funds are available for up to 10 years with the debt repaid according to a fixed interest and principal schedule. Character loans are used when the business does not have assets to support a loan. These are also called personal loans. These loans must have assets of an individual pledged as collateral or have the loan co-signed by another person. In extremely rare instances, the entrepreneur with a high credit rating can obtain money on an unsecured basis for a short time. Banks are very cautious in lending money, particularly to new ventures. Commercial loan decisions are made after the loan officer and loan committee does a careful review of the borrower and the financial track record of the business. Decisions are made based on quantifiable and subjective judgments. Bank lending decisions are made according to the 5 C's of lending. These are character, capital, capacity, collateral, and conditions. Past financial statements are reviewed in terms of key profitability and credit ratios and the entrepreneur's capital invested. Also, future projections are looked at on market size, sales, and profitability. Some intuitive factors that are looked at would be character and capacity, and these can become more important when there is little or no track record. The loan application format is generally a mini business plan. This provides the loan officer and the loan committee information on the creditworthiness of the individual and the ability of the venture to repay the loan. Presenting a positive business image and following the established protocol, of course, are important in obtaining the funds. With satisfactory interest rates and terms, the entrepreneur should borrow the maximum amount possible that can be repaid. I repeat, the maximum amount possible. Emphasis on that can be repaid. The venture must make sure that it'll generate enough cash flow to repay the interest and the principal on the loan. And obviously, the entrepreneur should take a look at several banks in order to secure the most favorable terms. If the entrepreneur is unable to secure a bank loan, an alternative is a guarantee loan from the Small Business Administration, SBA. It is important to understand that the SBA does not directly give out loans. Instead, it provides a guarantee to banks and lenders for the money they lend to small businesses. This guarantee allows these institutions to offer loans to small businesses at lower interest rates and with more flexible terms than they might otherwise provide because the risk to the lender is reduced. Here's how the process generally works. The SBA has specific criteria to determine if a business is eligible. These criteria typically revolve around the size of the business, its type, and its financial standing. There's a loan application. A small business owner approaches a bank or lender that participates in the SBA's lending program. If the bank is hesitant about the loan due to risks associated with repayment, the SBA's guarantee assures the bank that the SBA will cover a portion of the loan if the borrower defaults. The terms and interest rates of the loans are usually more favorable than traditional loans. Rates and terms are negotiated between the borrower and the lender but are subject to SBA maximums. The small business owner repays the loan to the bank or lender, not to the SBA. And while the SBA guarantee makes it easier for businesses to get loans, borrowers are still obligated to repay these loans. If they default, the SBA will cover the guaranteed portion, but the borrower will still owe the remaining balance to the lender. It's a good idea for small business owners to consult with an SBA-approved lender or visit the SBA website, sba.gov. There you can find more specific details on their loan programs. The basic 7A loan guarantee is the SBA's primary business loan program, and it helps qualified small businesses obtain financing when they cannot obtain loans through regular lending channels. Repayment ability from business cash flow is essential to get a 7A loan. Other criteria include good character, management capability, collateral, and owner's equity. The SBA 7A loan program has a maximum loan amount of $5 million, with the SBA maximum exposure of $3.75 million or 75%. Interest rates are negotiated but subject to SBA maximums, which are pegged to the prime rate, LIBOR rate, or an optional peg rate, and may be fixed or variable. Most of the loans have the same guarantee features. The SBA can guarantee 85% of loans of $150,000 or less and 75% of loans between $150,000 and $5 million. Some differences include the SBA Express loans with a maximum guarantee of 50% and export working capital loans with a maximum guarantee of 90%. Lenders are charged a guarantee and servicing fee for each approved loan. The 504 loan program provides fixed-rate financing to enable small businesses to acquire machinery, equipment, or real estate. And the SBA microloan, a 7M loan program, provides a short-term loan of up to $50,000 to small businesses for working capital or the purchase of assets. Other loans include international trade and export working capital loans, export express loans, and CDC 504 loans. Be sure to go to their website to get more detail and take a look at the loans, sba.gov. This next type of financing is called Research and Development Limited Partnership. This financing applies to entrepreneurs in high technology areas. It provides funds from investors looking for tax shelters. A typical R&D partnership arrangement is established between a sponsoring company developing the technology with funds provided by a limited partnership of individual investors. Research and development limited partnerships are particularly good when the project involves a high degree of risk and significant expense. The three components are the contract, the sponsoring company, and the limited partnership. The contract specifies the agreement between the sponsoring company and the limited partnership. The company does not guarantee results, but performs work on a best effort basis, compensated by the partnership on a fixed fee or a cost-plus arrangement. The typical contract specifies that the liability for any loss be borne by the limited partners. There are some tax advantages for both the partnership and the company. The next component is the limited partners. Limited partners have limited liability. Any tax benefits of the losses in the early stages of the R&D limited partnership are passed directly to the partners. When the technology is successfully developed, the partners share the profits. The sponsoring company acts as the general partner developing the technology. The company usually has the base technology but needs funds to develop and modify it for commercial success. The company usually retains the rights to use the base technology, to develop other products, and to use the developed technology in the future for a fee. In the funding stage, a contract is established and money is invested for the R&D effort. In the development stage, the sponsoring company performs the actual research using the funds of the limited partners. If the technology is successfully developed, the exit stage begins, with both parties commercially reaping the benefits. In the typical equity partnership agreement, the sponsoring company and limited partners form a new jointly owned corporation. An alternative is to incorporate the R&D limited partnership itself and then either merge it into the sponsoring company or continue as a new entity. Another exit strategy is a royalty partnership, in which a royalty based on the sale of the products is paid by the company to the limited partnership. The company and limited partners may form a joint venture to manufacture and market the product. There are benefits and costs to forming an R&D limited partnership. R&D limited partnership provide needed funds with a minimum of equity dilution while reducing the risks. And the sponsoring company's financial statements are strengthened through the attraction of outside capital. What about the costs? The costs would be considerable time and money are expended. An R&D limited partnership takes a minimum of 6 months and $50,000 in professional fees. Most R&D limited partnerships are unsuccessful. The restrictions placed on the technology may be substantial, and the exit from the partnership may be too complex and involve too much fiduciary responsibility. There are, however, examples of successful R&D limited partnerships. Syntex Corporation, Genentech, and Trilogy Limited would be those examples. Another way of financing would be finding government grants. The Small Business Innovation Development Act requires all federal agencies with an R&D budget to award a portion of those funds to small businesses through the Small Business Innovation Research Grants Program, also called SBIR. This provides a uniform method of soliciting, evaluating, and selecting research proposals. There are 12 federal agencies involved in the program. Each agency develops topics and publishes solicitations describing the R&D topic it will fund. Small businesses submit proposals directly to each agency, and then each agency evaluates each proposal on a competitive basis and makes awards through contract, grant, or cooperative agreement. The SBIR program has 3 phases. Phase 1. Phase 1 awards are up to $100,000 for 6 months for feasibility-related experimental or theoretical research. Phase 2 is the principal R&D effort for promising projects at the end of Phase 1. Phase 2 awards up to $750,000 for 24 months of further research R&D. The money is for prototype products. In Phase 3, funds from the private sector or regular government contracts provide funds to commercialize the developed technology. The procedure is as follows. The agencies publish solicitations describing the areas of research they will fund. Then, the second step is submission of the proposal by a company or an individual. Each agency screens the proposal it receives, and passing proposals are evaluated on a technology basis by experts. Awards are granted to those projects that have the best commercialization potential. Any patents, rights, research, data, and software generated are owned by the company, not the government. The SBIR grant program is one viable method of obtaining funds for a technically based company that is independently owned and operated and employs 500 or fewer individuals. The Small Business Technology Transfer (STTR) program was established by the Small Business Technology Transfer Act of 1992. Federal agencies with budgets over $1 billion are required to set aside 0.3% for small businesses. 5 agencies participate in the STTR program: the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, Department of Health and Human Services, NASA, and the National Science Foundation. SBIR and STTR programs differ in regulations on partnering and employment of researchers. In the SBIR program, the principal investigator must be employed by the venture. In the STTR, there is no employment stipulation. The SBIR has a maximum of 33% Phase 1 and 50% Phase 2 in consulting costs. There are other grants available at the federal, state, and local levels. They take many different forms and vary greatly depending on the objectives involved and the geographic area. The federal and state governments may provide training grants to companies locating in and/or hiring in a labor surplus area. The grants may pay 50% of the salary of the employee for up to the first year until the employee is fully productive, and often get some tax reductions at the state and federal levels for a period of time. Another source of funds is private investors, also called angel investors, who may be family and friends or wealthy individuals. An investor usually takes an equity position. They can influence the nature of the business and may be involved in the company's operations. The investor's degree of involvement is important for you to consider. Some investors want to be actively involved, others only want an advisory role, and others are even more passive. At the end of the day, each investor is interested in recovering their investment, plus a good rate of return. For a public offering, registering the securities with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, requires a number of reporting procedures once the firm has gone public. A private offering, on the other hand, is faster and less costly, with a limited number of sophisticated investors who have business acumen and the ability to absorb risk. They do still need access to material information about the company. Private offerings are subject to Regulation D. Regulation D is a regulation under the U.S. Securities Act of 1933 that allows companies to raise capital through the sale of equity or debt securities without having to register those securities with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. It provides exemptions from the registration requirements, making it easier and less expensive for companies, especially startups and small businesses, to raise funds. Regulation D requires the issuer of a private offering to file 5 copies of Form D with the SEC on a strict timetable. The entrepreneur carries the burden of proving that he has met the exceptions granted. Each offering memorandum needs to be numbered and contain instructions that the document should not be disclosed. The date that the investor reviews the company information and dates of any discussions between the company and entrepreneur should be recorded. The book documenting all specifics of the offering should be placed in the firm's permanent file. Under Rule 504, a company can sell up to $500,000 of securities to any number of investors in any 12-month period. Rule 505 permits the sale of $5 million of unregistered securities in the private offering in any 12-month period. These can be sold to any 35 investors and an unlimited number of accredited investors. Accredited investors include institutional investors, investors who purchase over 150,000 of the issuer's securities, investors whose net worth is $1 million or more at the time of sale, investors with incomes in excess of $200,000 in the last 2 years, and directors, officers, and general partners of the issuing company. Rule 505 permits no general advertising or solicitation through public media. When only accredited investors are involved, no disclosure is required under Rule 505. 2-year financial statements must be available. All companies selling private placement securities must furnish appropriate company information to both accredited and unaccredited investors and allow any questions to be asked prior to the sale. Rule 506 allows an issuing company to sell an unlimited amount of securities to 35 investors and an unlimited number of accredited investors. In securing outside funding, the entrepreneur must accurately disclose all information. Entrepreneurs often use Regulation D to access capital from angel investors, venture capitalists, and other private sources. However, it's really important to work closely with legal counsel when pursuing a Regulation D offering to ensure compliance with all federal and state regulations. Bootstrap financing is important at startup and early years of the venture when capital from debt financing or equity financing is more expensive. Outside capital is expensive. It takes 2 to 6 months to raise outside capital when the company can least afford the time. It is thought that outside capital often decreases a firm's drive for sales and profits and increases the impulse to spend. Outside capital can also decrease the company's flexibility and could potentially hamper creativity. Bootstrap financing involves using any possible method for obtaining and conserving cash. This can involve delaying payment to suppliers with caution as to not damage relationships. Also possible, volume discounts, frequent customer discounts, promotional discounts, obsolescence money, and bulk packaging. Entrepreneurs can also think about consignment financing, which is placing a standing order for the entire amount of goods by taking shipment and paying only as needed. The only possible limitation of bootstrap financing is the imagination. Don't forget to go to sba.gov where you can take a look at some of their funding programs. You can learn about their loans, about investment capital, and more. For example, here are some of the loans that we discussed. Lastly, you can take a look at some of the government grants that help businesses. Lastly, the 2 things to remember about financing are: 1. Seek outside capital only after all possible internal sources of funds have been explored. And 2, when obtaining funds, the entrepreneur must stay involved with the basics of the business. And that brings us to the end of chapter 11. We have discussed the types of financing available for the private firm. We have talked about the role of commercial banks in financing new ventures. We have discussed SBA loans, as well as aspects of research and development limited partnerships. Finally, we have talked about government grants and the role of private placement as a source of capital. Some key terms that we have looked at are asset-based for loans, conventional bank loans, debt financing, equity financing, general partner, limited partner, private offering, Regulation D, research and development limited partnerships, and SBIR grants program. All right, that's it for this chapter. If you have any questions, be sure to let me know. Until next time.